From August 21st to 29th, 1965, astronauts Gordon Cooper and P. Conrad flew Gemini 5, the third manned flight of the Gemini program and the longest manned American space mission to that point. Two primary objectives were to spend 8 days in orbit, the length of time it would take to fly to the moon, land on it, and return to Earth, and practice rendezvous maneuvers, a crucial component of future moon landing missions that had yet to be achieved by either the US or USSR. Secondary objectives included evaluating the performance of the Gemini spacecraft's new fuel cells and performing a controlled capsule reentry to a predetermined landing spot, and the astronauts would carry out 17 defense-related, medical, and scientific experiments. The prime and backup crews were named on February 8, 1965. The mission's command pilot was U.S. Air Force Captain Leroy Gordon Cooper, the sixth American to fly in space and veteran of Mercury Atlas 9. The pilot was rookie U.S. Navy Lieutenant Charles P. Conrad of NASA's second class of astronauts, the New 9. Rookies Neil Armstrong and Elliot C. of the New 9 served as the backup command pilot and pilot, respectively. According to Leap of Faith by Gordon Cooper and Bruce Henderson, Cooper and Conrad wanted to name their Gemini capsule Lady Bird after the First Lady of the United States, Lady Bird Johnson. However, NASA was very reluctant to allow astronauts to name their spacecraft, after they begrudgingly allowed the Gemini 3 astronauts to name theirs Molly Brown, so NASA Administrator James Webb turned down the request. While the crews of Gemini 3 and Gemini 4 designed their own mission insignia that embellished silver medallions they carried into space, Gemini 5 was the first mission to feature embroidered patches. Cooper and Conrad, an Air Force test pilot and a Navy test pilot respectively, realized they had never been in a military or government organization without a patch symbolizing their mission or vehicle. Cooper's Mercury capsule, as well as all previous Mercury capsules, had simple but unique insignia painted on their exterior panels, similar to nose art on aircraft. The pair chose the image of a Conestoga wagon, a horse-drawn covered wagon used by American settlers in the 18th and 19th centuries, to represent the pioneering nature of Gemini 5. The mission's primary objective was orbiting the Earth for 8 days, so the slogan 8 days or bust was included in red letters across the wagon. However, Administrator Webb was concerned about the motto, writing in an August 14, 1965 memo, quote, "I wish it could be omitted. If the flight does not go 8 days, there are many who are going to say it was busted," unquote. A piece of cloth was sewn over it prior to launch. If you look closely, you can see the red words through the extra strip of fabric. Allegedly, the astronauts asked a local patch company to produce the patches, and the two sewed them onto their spacesuits themselves. Cooper and Conrad waited until their pre-launch dinner party to tell Administrator Webb about the patches, and he was quite unhappy at the, admittedly mild, insubordination. After they were able to convince him the insignia represented everyone working on the program, and not just the two of them, he reluctantly allowed the patches to fly. After Gemini 5's success, Webb directed all future space crews to wear their own patch, internally referred to as a Cooper patch, thus beginning one of the most cherished traditions in the space industry. Cooper and Conrad were awaiting liftoff on August 19th, when thunderstorms and a lightning strike near the pad scrubbed the launch. The morning of launch, the two ate the traditional breakfast of steak and eggs at the crew quarters at the Kennedy Space Center, and suited up in a trailer at Pad 16 on Cape Kennedy before a van drove them to their Gemini Titan II launch vehicle. Gemini 5 lifted off from Launch Complex 19 on Cape Kennedy on Friday, August 21st, 1965, at 9:59:59 a.m. local time. Gemini 3 command pilot Gus Grissom served as Cape Capsule Communicator, or CAPCOM, while rookie Buzz Aldrin and Gemini 4 command pilot Jim McDivitt served as Houston Capcoms. The oxidizer tank of the Titan II rocket's first stage was retrieved from the Atlantic Ocean by the USS DuPont and is now on display at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. The spacecraft entered an orbit of 101 by 216 miles, or 163 by 349 kilometers. Upon reaching orbit, Gordon Cooper became the first person to fly 2 orbital space missions. On May 15, 1963, Cooper became the 6th American and 10th person in space on board the 34-hour-long Mercury Atlas 9 mission, the final mission of the Mercury program. Cooper and his spacecraft Faith 7 completed 22 orbits, and he became the first American to spend at least a full day in space. While Cooper was the first person to fly 2 orbital missions, Gus Grissom, sole pilot of the suborbital Mercury Redstone 4 and the aforementioned command pilot of Gemini 3, was the first person to launch into space twice, and Captain Joseph Walker became the first human to enter space twice by surpassing the Kármán line, the internationally accepted boundary of space at 62 miles or 100 kilometers, on flights 90 and 91 of the North American X-15 rocket-powered aircraft in 1963. The Gemini spacecraft, due to the length of time it needed to operate in space, was the first spacecraft to use fuel cells instead of chemical batteries. 2 hours and 13 minutes into the flight, Gemini 5 ejected the 74-pound, or 33.5 kilogram, rendezvous evaluation pod from the spacecraft's aft adapter section and watched it drift away from their capsule at a relative speed of about 6.5 feet, or 2 meters, per second. It had an antenna, flashing beacons, and a radar transponder, and Gemini 5 was to maneuver 6 miles, or almost 10 kilometers, below, and 14 miles, or 22.5 kilometers, behind the pod. They would then fly to it for rendezvous. Later, while out of radio contact with Earth, the crew found the pressure in one of the spacecraft's fuel cells had dropped by more than 90%, from 850 pounds per square inch to only 65 pounds per square inch. While this was above the 22.2 psi, or 153 kilopascal, minimum for operating the spacecraft, Cooper shut down the fuel cells and relied on battery power for the time being. Unfortunately, with the fuel cells temporarily out of service, their crew was not able to rendezvous with the rendezvous evaluation pod. If they were to remain out of service, the crew would have to abort and return to Earth within 13 hours. During the rest of Flight Day 1, the fuel cells were gradually powered back on, but the rendezvous exercise had been terminated. The spacecraft would be frequently powered down to conserve power in free drift. Flight Day 2 was spent conducting experiments and taking pictures of Earth. On Flight Day 3, Cooper and Conrad performed a phantom rendezvous by maneuvering to a set point in orbit as if they were rendezvousing with the spacecraft. The test was devised by astronaut Buzz Aldrin, who held a doctorate in astronautics and specialized in orbital mechanics. They used the Gemini's Orbit Attitude and Maneuvering System, or OAMS, to adjust their apogee, their farthest point from Earth, adjust their phase, or move to a different location in the same orbit, and change their orbital inclination. The test was executed perfectly and was the first time a precision maneuver was performed on a spaceflight. The spacecraft was powered down again and continued to free drift. The astronauts saw a Minuteman I missile launch from Vandenberg Air Force Base in California while passing over. At mission elapsed time 97 hours, 56 minutes, and 13 seconds, or after 4 days, 1 hour, 56 minutes, and 13 seconds in orbit, Gemini 5 broke the American manned space endurance record set by Gemini 4 in June 1965. Cooper and Conrad observed a rocket sled test as they flew over Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, the ignition of another Minuteman missile and the contrail of its chase plane while over Vandenberg, and the USS Lake Champlain aircraft carrier in the Atlantic Ocean. On the morning of August 26th, at mission elapsed time 119 hours and 8 minutes, or after 4 days, 23 hours and 8 minutes in space, Gemini 5 officially became the longest crewed space mission, surpassing the Soviet Vostok 5's record set in June 1963. On Flight Day 5, one of the OAMS thruster blocks malfunctioned repeatedly and was shut off for good. 16 of the 17 planned medical, photography, and scientific experiments were carried out, including photography of celestial objects in zodiacal light, cloud-top spectrometry, photography of the Zagros Mountains in the Middle East, using a bungee cord for exercise, and eyesight tests. According to the NASA history publication On the Shoulders of Titans, A History of Project Gemini, Cooper captured the first photos of the light of the moonless sky. P. Conrad wore leg cuffs that inflated for 2 minutes out of every 6 minutes to help with blood circulation. The one experiment not completed was photography of the rendezvous evaluation pod. As for the pioneering astronauts, they reported being cold, bored, and having trouble sleeping. They had to wear their G4C spacesuits the entirety of the mission, and after 8 days in space, the cabin was full of trash. Conrad would go on to call the mission, quote-unquote, 8 days in a garbage can. Aside from photography and their scheduled experiments, Cooper and Conrad made a special call to the ground, or the sea to be more precise. Former Mercury astronaut Scott Carpenter was spending 30 days in the Navy's Sea-Lab 2 underwater habitat at a depth of 203 feet, or 62 meters, off the coast of La Jolla, California. The astronauts briefly talked to the astronaut-turned-aquanaut while they were each living in unique, isolated environments for extended periods of time. Gemini 5 was to splash down in the Atlantic Ocean 500 miles, or 800 kilometers, southwest of the island of Bermuda. However, during the final few days of the mission, a storm that would become Hurricane Betsy was forming and moving closer to that spot. By the morning of August 29th, Gemini 5's re-entry day, it had strengthened to a tropical storm and was off the east coast of Puerto Rico. The U.S. Weather Bureau recommended the astronauts return early to avoid splashing down too close to the storm, so NASA called for Gemini 5 to re-enter one orbit early. At mission elapsed time 190 hours and 27 minutes, over Hawaii, retrofire was initiated and the crew performed a controlled re-entry. On August 29th, after 7 days, 22 hours, and 55 minutes in space, Gemini 5 splashed down at the Atlantic Ocean 80 miles, or 130 kilometers, short of their planned splashdown point. Whoever programmed the onboard computer made the mistake of inputting Earth's rotation rate as 360 degrees per 24 hours instead of the correct 360.98 degrees per 24 hours. 90 minutes later, the crew was plucked out of the ocean and carried to the deck of the USS Lake Champlain. Gemini 5 was the final of 3 NASA spacecraft to be recovered by the Lake Champlain, an Essex-class aircraft carrier commissioned in June 1945. Named after the War of 1812 Battle of Lake Champlain, she brought troops home from Europe at the end of World War II during Operation Magic Carpet, served in the Korean War, and participated in NATO operations in the Mediterranean and in the blockade of Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Lake Champlain's first stint as a spacecraft recovery vessel was in May 1961 when she and her crew retrieved Alan Shepard and his Freedom 7 capsule about 300 miles, or 480 kilometers, downrange from Cape Canaveral. In January 1965, the carrier retrieved the unmanned Gemini 2 capsule, which in November 1966 became the first and only twice-flown American capsule until 2021. Lake Champlain's last major assignment was retrieving Gordon Cooper and P. Conrad and their Gemini 5 capsule from the Atlantic Ocean. The ship was decommissioned in May 1966 and sold for scrap in April 1972. The Gemini 5 capsule is now on display at Space Center Houston in Houston, Texas. On August 30th, Cooper and Conrad were flown to the Kennedy Space Center in Florida for debriefings and medical checkups, and they arrived back home to Houston on September 2nd. On September 14th, President Lyndon B. Johnson awarded the NASA Exceptional Service Medal to the 2 astronauts and Dr. Charles Berry, the astronauts' chief physician. From September 15th to September 28th, Gordon and Trudy Cooper and Pete and Jane Conrad traveled to 6 countries on a goodwill tour, visiting Greece, Turkey, Ethiopia, the Malagasy Republic, now Madagascar, Kenya, and Nigeria, also stopping in the Canary Islands before returning to Texas. While attending the International Astronautical Congress in Athens, Greece, the astronauts met Voskhod 2 cosmonauts Pavel Balyayev and Alexei Leonov. Leonov performed the first extravehicular activity in March 1965. Gordon Cooper served as backup command pilot of Gemini 12 in late 1966 and as backup commander of Apollo 10 in early 1969. The usual Apollo crew rotation placed him in the commander seat for Apollo 13, but Director of Flight Crew Operations Deke Slayton replaced Cooper with Alan Shepard, who had recently returned to active flight status due to the former's lax attitude towards training. In 1968, Cooper and Charles Buckley, the NASA Chief of Security at the Kennedy Space Center, entered the 24 Hours of Daytona, a 24-hour race held at the Daytona International Speedway in Daytona Beach, Florida, but were ordered by NASA to withdraw due to the dangers of motorsports. Cooper retired from both NASA and the U.S. Air Force in July 1970 with the rank of colonel, and worked as a technical consultant for numerous companies, including the Walt Disney Company, and was inducted into the International Space Hall of Fame in 1981 and the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame in 1990. He passed away on October 4, 2004 at his home in Ventura, California, at the age of 77 from heart failure. A portion of his ashes were launched into space twice, first in April 2007 on board the suborbital Up Aerospace Spaceloft XL sounding rocket, and second in May 2012 on board the SpaceX Commercial Orbital Transportation Services Demo Flight 2. P. Conrad's space career, on the other hand, was just getting started. He served as backup command pilot of Gemini 8 and command pilot of Gemini 11 in 1966. He and pilot Richard Gordon set a human space apogee record of 853 miles, or 1,373 kilometers, that remained unbroken for nearly 60 years, not counting the Apollo missions that broke free from Earth's orbit. Conrad was backup commander of Apollo 9 in spring 1969 and flew to the moon as commander of Apollo 12 that November, becoming the third and shortest person to walk on the moon. Conrad's final trip into space was as commander of Skylab 2, the first crew to visit America's first space station, Skylab. He retired from both NASA and the U.S. Navy in 1973 with the rank of captain, and in his 11 years as an astronaut, set 2 human space endurance records, walked on the moon, spent 4 weeks on the nation's first space station, and was on a rocket that got struck by lightning during launch. Conrad joined McDonnell Douglas in 1976 and was a consultant on the Delta Clipper experimental reusable single-stage-to-orbit launch vehicle in the 1990s. He was inducted into the International Space Hall of Fame in 1982 and the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame in 1993. P. Conrad passed away on July 8, 1999 at the age of 69 from internal injuries sustained in a motorcycle crash. In a September 11, 1965 report to President Johnson, NASA Deputy Administrator Hugh Dryden said the following about Gemini 5, quote, "The primary objective of the Gemini 5 mission was to demonstrate man's ability to function in the space environment for 8 days and to qualify the spacecraft systems under these conditions. The adaptability of the human body was indicated by the performance of the astronauts. This has assured us of man's capability to travel to the moon and return." Gemini 5 pushed the United States closer to landing men on the moon and overtook the stagnating Soviet manned space effort. The next Gemini mission would attempt to perform the first rendezvous between 2 vehicles in space, but not quite in a way anyone expected. Thank you so much for watching till the end of this video, and I hope you learned something new. As always, the link to my Gemini 5 web article will be in the description, and if you want more space history, hit subscribe and I'll see you next time. I've been Erin, and you've been watching Spaceflight Histories.